Low fat, high carbs, no carbs, high protein, paleo, keto, juice cleanse, cabbage soup. How many of us have tried one or maybe all of these approaches to food? I know I have. There's so much information out there that it's really hard to know where to start. Today, we're going to distinguish the hype from the truth when it comes to nutrition and our health. I'm Betty Wang, host of Betty's Smart Friends. I'm a certified financial planner who helps women be more empowered and feel less alone in their financial lives. Here to help us today is Yvonne Montoya Matthews. Yvonne is a double board certified functional nutritionist, certified herbalist, and educator with a passion for evidence-based nutrition and radical self-care. Please welcome Yvonne to the podcast. Hi, Yvonne.
Thanks. Hi. Thanks, Betty. So nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us today. I can't wait to hear more about what you have to share. I think before we started recording, I've talked about how my contemporaries, my friends and I we're continuously talking about perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, and along with diet changes, what helps, what doesn't help. So I'm really excited to have you here to sort of break through the noise and tell us what the evidence is and how you work with your clients. I guess let's start with how you got involved in this. You have a lot of letters behind your name that I could not memorize or write down. So could you share a little bit about your background and what brought you to this field?
Sure. It's a long story. We could probably be here all day talking about that. But I will give you kind of the quick and dirty. So I was a graphic designer and user experience designer in Los Angeles for 10 years. And towards the end of my career there, which I didn't know at the time was the end of my career, I got off birth control for the first time after about a decade and a half of being on it. I had met my now husband, at the time a boyfriend, and was talking to all my girlfriends in LA in book club about getting off birth control. They were all, wanting to start families and to get pregnant. And I had never thought about getting off of birth control before. I was put on it when I was a teenager in high school because I had, a horrible acne and just debilitating period issues, pain, heavy bleeds that I was missing school for every month. And, parents thought that was unacceptable. I was definitely game to like not have those issues as a teenager. So, the doctor's solution was birth control. And so I just never went off of it after that. So I went down the rabbit hole of, well, I don't want to get pregnant, but I also now know, maybe birth control isn't great. So what do I do? What are my options? Before exploring all that, I just was like, well, let's get off birth control. So made, educated myself, made a plan on like, how do I not get pregnant without birth control? But I got off of it. And now, I'm a professional as a graphic designer working for a corporation, going into the office every day. And I overnight pretty much had an entire face full of acne in my late 20s and all my period issues came back. Um, so, went down that whole rabbit hole system of, okay, I went to see my doctor. He said, why'd you get off birth control? Clearly it was the solution. Okay. Next, thank you. Next person.
So
Dermatologist.
helpful. Thank you.
Right? Yes, thank you for gaslighting me on that. Fantastic. Okay. So I went to a dermatologist thinking that maybe they're more holistic. Her solution was steroids, right? Accutane, something like that. And I was like, okay, well, this is also not the solution. Ended up a kind of a long way, winding path down, found actual functional medicine doctor in Los Angeles. This was, 10, 15 years ago at this point now. So it was still a very new up and coming field. So I didn't really know what I was getting into. But she did a bunch of tests that we're going to kind of talk about today a little bit. On me, we did a micronutrient blood test. We did a food allergy test. And I did one of my first elimination diets ever. And, this was all new stuff to me at the time. And it changed a lot of what I was going through and solved about two-thirds of my problems. And I, at that point, had gotten married, and a few months later, ironically, moved to Denver. So my husband started a business out here, and we were kind of ready for a change. So we moved out here, and at the time that meant going freelance. So I was freelance designing, which afforded me time to actually go into a physical nutrition school out in Boulder called Bowman College. And I was in school for nutrition 2 or 3 days a week in a physical classroom and really enjoying it. Really put a lot of the pieces together that were missing and, really helped myself. I mean, quite nearly like 100% turnaround, like or 360 turnaround or whatever you say
Yeah,
there.
I mean, your skin looks amazing.
Thanks. And that was, gosh, I went to school, nutrition school, finished in, early 2016. So, yeah, 8 years ago. And it was a light bulb moment for me to the fact where I loved graphic design. I had no intention of leaving the field, but I knew so much about nutrition now. I was like, I have to share this with everyone. Like anyone who
Yeah.
needs to hear it, I have to share it with them. So I got a job in Denver at an apothecary, started really learning herbs. They had a clinic space, so they allowed me to practice nutrition there with their clients. And that's kind of how I started my own private practice and building my network of people. I mean, they still refer people to me to this day, and their community is just really wonderful. Um, yeah, it all kind of happened a little bit kismet. And It's kind of how I've been practicing ever since. So, um, the letters behind my name, the BCHN is Board Certified Holistic Nutritionist. That is through the NANP, which is the National Association of Nutritional Practitioners. They are the ones who Bowman College is kind of sponsored by. So I got that a long time ago. You have to pass a board exam for that and clinic hours. And then in COVID, I decided to go back and get my master's. So I got my master's in clinical nutrition and integrative health and got my CNS, which is very like parallel to a registered dietitian's degree. So we have to have the same education as them. We are just licensed by different associations. So CNS stands for Certified Nutrition Specialist. And again, we have to have 1,000 supervised hours. It's identical for a registered dietitian. And we have to pass a board exam. And they also have to pass a very, very similar board exam. We tend to be more holistic in nature since we're not registered dietitians. We're not associated with any governmental dietary guidelines. So we tend to be more functional based, more holistic based, more integrative health. Although a lot of RDs now are coming into that area as well, understanding kind of the way that the world is going in the direction that we're going. And then our registered dietitians and CNSs can both and should both be licensed in states in which you can be licensed in. And so that's where the LDN comes from. That's a licensed dietitian nutritionist. And if I have a client in a certain state, I have to be licensed in that state. And so that's where the LDN comes in. So it's very state by state basis, and it's a little confusing sometimes even for me. But those are all the letters behind my name.
So
Uh,
you're qualified,
so I'm
basically.
qualified.
You're
Yes.
very, very qualified. So what are like common challenges that you're seeing for women over 45? As I approach 50, I'm like, am I supposed to be eating high protein? Then I get these Instagrams that say 2 eggs is not enough. And I'm allergic to eggs so I miss them, but I can't have them. What can I have? Are we supposed, you know, my generation grew up high carbs, low fat, and
Yeah.
so it's sort of and lots of cardio. So
Yeah,
all these things that are coming out, especially with the diet stuff, I have I go down a deep hole, but I don't know,
for
and
sure.
I don't have the expertise like you do to say that doesn't make sense or this makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's no evidence, right? It's or that I can tell.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned a lot of things there. So the
So,
first the first thing I would
sorry.
say, no, it's good. It's good.
I need to know.
We'll answer all your questions. The first thing I would say is It's not all right age related, although it's not like we go from 44 and then the next day we turn 45 and now we have all these problems, right? It's definitely,
Sometimes it feels like that.
it does feel like that for many of us. I wish there
Yeah.
was an age, right, where we could
Mhm.
pinpoint this thing and say, yes, for all women over X, this is the way to live. Unfortunately, you can have even identical twins, right, that have all of these same markers, live in the same area, same age, gender, all these things, and still have very different health conditions. So it's this thing called bioindividuality. And it's why I practice individual personalized nutrition, right? Because we really do have to kind of dive a little bit deeper. And some of it is genetic, right? There is a genetic component to all this stuff. And we're learning more and more about that as well, which is super exciting. But we do know there's two phases of perimenopause. So phase one can go from age 35 to 45. So that is still very young, but this first group is kind of marked by a higher, um, a different level of FSH. So that's follicular stimulating hormone. And it's a slow increase at that kind of age. And this is when we start to see cycles change a little bit, right? The day before, after I used to be 28 days. Now I'm 29. Now I'm 30. My period may be a little bit heavier, actually. You're starting to maybe not ovulate as regularly because you have lower or no progesterone at this point. Estrogen dominance, uterine fibroids, cysts. I mean, these are kind of even lower thyroid function. This is kind of what I start to see in that age range that indicates to me that this is what's going on. And I love relying on lab work now to actually verify, yes, this is the thing and this is how we're going to fix it. Then we have phase two of perimenopause, and that is 45 to 52-ish, really up to the point of menopause. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
me.
And again, you'll see FSH is continuing to climb at that point until you hit menopause. So progesterone is dropping. You are potentially bleeding heavier because of that. And then ovulation is stopping as well. And we know ovulation is very anti-inflammatory. So when we stop ovulating, we are now faced with cardiovascular issues because ovulation is so protective.
I
Our
had no
metabol
idea.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
I really had no idea.
All these things
I
are
just
so
thought it was such a
related.
monthly, it was just a pain.
Nope.
Oh, interesting.
Oftentimes this is why cholesterol goes up in this group of women. I see it all the time, and the doctor wants
Interesting.
to put them on, a statin. Um, we have bone health, right? Issues now starting to happen as well. So bone density loss, and our metabolism is slowing, all because ovulation is coming to a halt. And all these other markers in our hormones are changing. And so that's really the bulk of the people I see, right? And where a lot of the symptoms come from. So this can be, like you said, related to so many things: diet, genetics, stress, lifestyle, you name it. But doctors are only testing FSH levels for this, right? That's their main marker of diagnosis. Whereas I'm looking at all of your hormones. Sometimes I like to run something called a Dutch test, which is urine and saliva. We can look at, melatonin, cortisol, all your estrogens, testosterone, all of this stuff, and how you're metabolizing them. So how they're being cleared out of your body. Like, is your liver working well, right? If your liver isn't working as well either, these hormones are now getting recycled back into your body and they're acting like toxins and causing problems. So there's a whole like science to all of that as well. And it makes things really hard for women to be test subjects for research, right? People are like, well, men get all the research studies because their hormones are more, even keel. It's on a 24 cycle instead of a monthly cycle. Us, females or people with ovaries, we are still a mystery to science sometimes, and they're not studying us. And so we don't have the markers of, okay, this is how much protein you should take or have, this is the herb that's great for you, because people aren't studying us as much. And so that's starting to change, which is good. But I think it's still going to be a slow road to get there. So I don't know that it's really hard to like pinpoint and say this is the nutrition thing you need to do, but we can, or especially like as a general population, right? This is how much protein. But we definitely know that dietary guidelines are way too low. That's definitely something we know for certain. And I would say protein is definitely a good option when you're getting into perimenopause and menopause. And then, of course, depending on who you are, right? Are you somebody that is kind of an athlete, maybe moves a little bit more than somebody who has a desk job? All of those things as well will play a role into how much protein you need. But I would tell you the dietary guidelines are exceptionally low for most people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it better to have meat or beans or fish?
Um,
Because it gets confused again,
yeah. Yeah.
listening to my or Instagram knows, so it just sends me stuff where I'm like, oh, yeah.
First and foremost, I would say make sure you're getting your information on Instagram from a reputable person, not just, some social media influencer. So, maybe a registered dietitian, maybe somebody that has their licensed degree in nutrition. I think that's really important because there's just so much misinformation out there. I even
Yes.
see, personal trainers talking about probiotics. And I'm like, I know you're getting paid by this company. That's great. You need to make money, but really you should probably stay in your lane and your scope of practice because I'm not going on Instagram and saying, lift this weight and do this thing because I'm not a personal trainer. So I would say that's my little soapbox on where you get your information from.
No, I totally agree. But
Yeah.
it is something where I'm like, oh, it just
Yeah.
sort of it sticks in the back of your mind like,
Yeah.
oh, they said this
Yeah.
and but yeah, you're right. It's not somebody. It's like the same with financial advice. There's people who are just giving it online and
Yeah.
you're like, that's not quite
Yeah.
that's slightly dangerous to
Right.
be saying that. Um,
100%. And this is the same way, right? Because we're talking
yeah.
about somebody's health. This is slightly dangerous for you to be saying this. Um, So as far as like what protein is good for you, I would say it again, like you mentioned eggs being allergic to eggs. Great. Because you're allergic to eggs, that food is going to be inflammatory for you. But eggs in general are not inflammatory, right? So we could even go as far to say that like gluten and dairy can be a great protein source. Not a lot of people tolerate dairy very well. And if you don't tolerate it and you can't break it down, that thing is going to be inflammatory for you. So, in general, what I say to people is not every food is bad. All food has value. What is good for your body is going to be determined by your biology. So, I would say, no eggs for you, Betty, obviously. Protein of any kind is great. So, do you digest meat protein well? If you don't, we might need to look. So, our body doesn't have enzymes in the mouth to break down protein. So we do have enzymes in our mouth to break down carbohydrates. It's called salivary amylase. And we have a enzyme to break down fats. That's called salivary lipase. But no enzymes in our mouth to break down protein. So the first way we actually can break down protein is with our teeth. So the first thing you can do, which is great because it's free, is chew your food better. So
Oh,
especially
that's interesting.
when we're talking about protein, protein is notoriously hard to digest for many reasons. So chewing your food more is always a great recommendation. It's something we can all do at home. It's really hard though. So I encourage you, Betty, tonight when you're at the dinner table with your family,
Yeah, my
try.
kids are going to be like, what is wrong with you?
They're like, Mom's still at the table.
What is, you just
Try
get
chewing
weirder
your
and
food,
weirder, Mom.
right?
Yeah.
You can blame it on me. Um,
Yeah.
Try chewing your food like 20 times. But I bet you that's going to feel like an eternity to you. And even
Yes.
that might not be enough. So, but it's a good start. So that's
So is
step
it
number
supposed to be
one.
like mushy in your mouth?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I will try it. It sounds kind of gross.
Do your best, right? Even
Yes.
one or two chews is better than what you were doing before, because then
Okay.
from there, the next chance protein has to break down is in your stomach with hydrochloric acid or stomach acid. Sometimes it's called HCl. It's all the same thing. That really helps break protein down from an enzymatic standpoint. And so when we chew, we're helping that process, right? We're facilitating that better. As we age, we also know our stomach acid goes down. And a lot of us have been told, right, especially with like things like heartburn and GERD, take proton pump inhibitors, the Prevacid or, what are those, bicarbonate. tablets, um,
Tums.
antacids, Tums. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
They taste
And
good.
they taste good, but they also lower our stomach acid more. And the
Oh,
problem with that means if we already have low stomach acid and we're continuing to lower it, we're actually not giving our body what it needs to break these foods down. When they're not being broken down, they pass through our small intestines and we're not absorbing the nutrients that we can from this food, and it's going to try to go out the other direction. And so first of all, we want stomach acid. Stomach acid is what breaks these foods down. And so part of the reason people experience GERD and heartburn is because they have low stomach acid. They're not digesting their food, and their food has to go somewhere. So it goes up because it's too big to go through the small intestines. This is
that is not
heartburn.
some, yeah, that is not something, it seems like,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a big, big issue. I studied under a doctor to get a lot of my licensure hours, and this is like one of his number one things he loves to talk about, and it always blows people's mind. Um,
Yeah, because
Pretty
you assume
much,
that it's too much
yeah,
acid, and that's why
yep.
it's popping back up.
Yep.
Interesting.
And the great news is we actually have some really holistic ways we can test that with lemon juice, bitters, supplements we can use, baking soda, things like that, where we can actually do home tests with clients to see how much stomach acid do they actually have. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's low. Very, very rarely that one, 10% person actually does have high stomach acid. And then, they're the ones that should be taking those kinds of medications or over the counter prescriptions. But yeah, in general, digestion and our enzyme level really, really are helping to break down not just all our foods, but proteins as well. And so that's a big issue. And as we age, it becomes more and more of an issue. So that's one of my biggest things with people, especially with protein, is if we're not digesting it, then we can't use the nutrients from it. You can eat all the protein you want. We're not really doing our body a service. So really getting that digestion working from even the basic levels of chewing our food more can be really helpful. Yeah.
Wow. All right. I feel like
Not
my
what you
mind,
expected to hear,
no, I
huh?
feel like my mind is blown. I'm like, oh, okay. What else do you see with, I mean, there's no magic bullet, which I think I would love, right?
Wouldn't we all?
Yes. So let's say someone like me, or
Yep.
we're coming to you for help. I mean, relatively no complaints, just basically kind of what you're talking about, not like fatigue and definitely weight gain and just feeling kind of sluggish. Like, where do you start, or how does what does this look like with you?
Yeah, so if that's what the person is coming to me with and symptoms, I would say um, I would like to do a food journal first. If that is, now I also see a lot of eating disorder and disordered eating clients, and we don't have to do a food journal, so that's not something I require. But if somebody is willing to do it and it doesn't bother them, a food journal is really helpful to see, and I enter it into a really fun app that dials in not just your macronutrients, because you can see that on like a Fitbit app, but all of your micronutrients as well. So every single vitamin, we're talking omega-3s, choline, I mean, you name it. And we can actually see like where are some big holes in your nutrition and in the foods that you're eating. So we can go that route, which is a great place to start for many people, right? We got to have the foundational levels of meeting all your needs from a nutritional standpoint. And that doesn't mean eating rice crackers and like, boiled chicken, right? It can be eating really delicious foods too. But meeting that baseline is really foundational. On top of that, lab work, functional lab work like hormone panels, like that Dutch test, a gut stool test is fantastic. There's amazing markers in there. We know now how much the gut is involved in a lot of our hormones as well, including cortisol, including estrogen, and all of these ways too, especially as to how is it cleared out of our liver? Like this is all determined by the
Is that
gut.
the is that pooping in a box?
It is
That thing?
pooping
Oh
in a
gosh.
box.
I-
But you do it at home, Betty. You're not doing it at my house. So, nobody has
Yeah,
to know but
that
you.
might be a hurdle for me. Okay, continue.
Um, So those are the nice things that as a licensed, healthcare functional provider, we can do together that make it less like throwing spaghetti at a wall, which is kind of not to say that that's what I did for the majority of the beginning of my career, but I wasn't testing because I wasn't licensed at that time. And so now that I am, it's nice to have a very direct, clear path that says, okay, your estrogen is here. It should be here. What can we do to help that? What foods can we eat? Even hormone replacement therapy, we're learning more and more that that is not a bad thing, right? If your body and your genetics can tolerate that, that can actually be a really wonderful and supportive way in this transitional period that we're going through. Um, and then obviously herbs, right? You know, I'm a clinical herbalist, so I love working with herbs and hormones for this group of people as well. So there are a lot of options there, but I love food, looking at the food, getting those foundationals, and then also lab work as well, if it can be afforded, because it is expensive and oftentimes not covered by insurance. To kind of really dial in, right? That's like the functional medicine part where we're saying we don't want to just cover up symptoms like brain fog, hot flashes, you know, you're gaining weight for a reason, right? We want to know what that reason is. And so the lab work can be really helpful in dialing that in and helping actually make change faster, right?
I don't know a lot about herbalists or what does that mean? Are you making like a tea or do you make like those little like capsules that I see
Yeah.
at Vitamin Cottage? Like I don't know. Tell
Yeah.
us tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. It can be any and all of those things. I really love herbal tea. I mean, for many, many reasons. One, it's caffeine free. Two, many of us are dehydrated anyways, and it can be an extra way of like not having to drink water because
Yeah.
I hear from so many people, oh, it's so boring. I'm so tired of it, like, or whatever it is, right? I don't do it. Herbal tea can be a really nice way to kind of tackle a bunch of different things at once. Um, but when we're talking about this group in particular, teas can be nice. Sometimes it is capsule supplementation because they're a little bit more standardized. We know exactly like, we're getting 200 milligrams of this thing. And so that can be really helpful for symptom management, helping with estrogen, progesterone, things like that. So, there's typically like a couple of herbs that I really like for perimenopause and menopause, and they're all estrogen related or progesterone related, and it's chaste tree berry. Sometimes it's called Vitex. Um, it's really popular for mood swings, which happen at this time. Breast tenderness happens a lot right at this time. And then pretty much, it's really great for any estrogen levels and progesterone levels and helping with that, like estrogen dominance balance. So that's a nice one I often recommend. And then black cohosh is also another wonderful herb. This is great for hot flashes and night sweats, mood swings as well, some sleep disturbances that happen in this area as well, and even things like vaginal dryness. All are symptoms that black cohosh can really help with. And, you know, again, like a lot of these herbs too, they have studies behind them and research to back them. We always learn from those studies that we need more studies. There's always that caveat. But a lot of these studies show that they have mild estrogenic effects, which is really what is happening with those symptoms and why it's helping us transition into that period. Um, Also, a lot of these herbs just tend to be anti-inflammatory in nature as well. So you're getting some extra help there as well with the aging process and all the foods and the stress and the medications, right? All the things that we uh, inflame our body with every
Yeah.
day and over time. So those are two of the key ones. There's so many different ones, Betty. I mean, herbalism is such a wonderful toolkit to use and a little bit more individualized even than food, I think, because depending on what's going on with someone, I may recommend a tea mixture. Some people hate capsules, right? It's really very dependent on what that person is willing to do and wants to do. So, yeah, it can be really powerful medicine, though.
At what point do the clients come to you or do they go to their doctors and find out they're sort of getting nowhere and they come to you with these sorts of things?
Yeah.
Because again, the media is like, oh, why would you go to why wouldn't you go to the doctor instead? And I think the same issues, right? Sometimes they're not as helpful or they give you a pill and you might not be comfortable with that. Is that what you're kind of seeing, or just people who aren't sure where to go, or
Yeah, I often say I'm pretty much the last practitioner that they come to for
yeah.
many reasons.
Yeah.
One is, yeah, they're frustrated with the system, right? They've seen all the people, they've gone to multiple doctors.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, women, especially, right, we're gaslit, right? Oh, this is just how you have to live. This is what it's like to be a mom, or this is what, it's like, no. And I still deserve to feel great, right? Like that's not an excuse. And then, yeah, they'll go see. I've had many clients that come to me and say, I've seen a dietitian or nutritionist, right? Many covered by insurance. And they're like, oh, yeah, they told me it didn't matter really what I ate. And I'm like, wow, really? So they went to school for nutrition and they're telling you it doesn't matter what you, okay, okay, great. So, a lot of it is healthcare related, I think, and just, I think we've all been having these conversations, at least I have been having these
Yeah,
conversations a lot recently with a lot of the news that has been going on with just, all of the issues with our medical system and insurance. That is not to say, right, if you break your arm, you're not coming to me. I'm not helping
right.
you with a stitch or a broken arm or any of that. So,
You're not like this herb will help you
yeah,
out.
yeah, take this, you'll be fine. Um, so
Don't worry about the swelling.
there's definitely, right, I think that's the integrative health part, right? We all as practitioners serve a role and can have multiple people helping you in different areas, but I tend to be the last person people come to and from that line of kind of like care coming down and oftentimes just saying, okay, I guess, insurance may not cover this person, me, but if I'm going to get help, it's worth it, right? How much are you paying
Mhm.
now versus how much do you pay in the end to solve some of these issues? And in the end, I'm the last person they see because I help them the majority of the time. Now, I have clients that pay me for services and they expect that magic pill, and when they don't get it, they're like, "Well, oh, I have to do work. Okay, see you later." So they may go find somebody else. But yeah, in general, if people stick to it, right? It's not because I'm not giving someone medication or a shot or an injection. It takes time, right? Change takes time, and we think about how long we get to the point where we see symptoms and then we expect immediate results is just not really the right frame of mind or mindset. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to see some of the change. And sometimes it's quite rapid depending on where someone's coming from, right? And how much change that they're making. But yeah, it's a long road. Many people come to me very frustrated.
Can you share a success story with us of someone, I mean, without, of course, you know, compromising someone's privacy, but,
Sure.
or especially someone, in female, older, and going through these things, like that might be relevant to us.
Yeah, for sure. I often get asked this question, right? People want to hear success stories and, that people
A
like them
Google, they
have been
want to have a
helped.
Google review.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I think it's a legitimate question. There are, wow, so many people I could pull from. There was a gal about 2 or 3 years ago that came to me. She lived in New York. She was about mid 40s, so I think she was 46 at the time. Female, and she's about 30 pounds overweight. Her main complaints were anxiety, digestive issues, hot flashes, and brain fog. Those were her main issues. If I'm recalling all of them, there might have been a few more. Typically, people come to me too, and I think you probably can understand this, but we think of nutrition, we think of weight loss, weight gain,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. And so her main thing was, I want to lose these 30 pounds. And then we started going through her intake, and we were like, oh, you have anxiety. Oh, okay. Oh, you have digestive issues. Okay. And we like all these things added up, and I was like, well, you're likely going through perimenopause. So we can probably relate all of these things to something going on in some hormone fluctuation or even things like cortisol, right, which is still a hormone. She tried Whole 30, she tried intermittent fasting. like the list of things that you said at the beginning,
Yes,
right? She
yes.
went through all those things
I did try those, yes.
and was frustrated. I think she ended up having a lot of food fear. Like she was like, I don't eat this, I don't eat this, I don't eat this. I heard this is inflammatory, right? Like amassing all the things that we've already talked about, right? Of uh all of these things. And so she's like, I don't know what to eat. I eat these like six foods. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Um, so we ended up, and I see this a lot in women, especially, well, kind of across the board, but I mostly see women anyhow. But we did a food journal, and she was barely consuming 1,200 calories a day. And she thought she was eating a lot. And she was also trying to lose weight. So she also knew she was kind of wanting to restrict as well. And so, I've heard people say, well, I don't eat breakfast because it's empty calories. I don't, well, okay, when do we need our energy throughout the day, though? We need it when we wake up to go through our day. So if we're not eating breakfast, we're imbalancing our blood sugar, which is partly how we get energy. And we also just don't have calories, our literal energy for our body. We don't have that to get through the day. And the body isn't this nice math equation, which I wish sometimes it was, where it's like calories in, calories out, holds some water, but it's also what are you eating and when are you eating it? And so, and how are you digesting it, right? Because we even talked about if you're not digesting well, you're really not getting the nutrients from the food you're eating. Um, so we did all of those things together. We looked at all of that. And oftentimes I do see when people are trying to lose weight, they're in a calorie restriction. When you've been in a calorie restriction for years, maybe decades, as some women are, our metabolism will shift and slow down, not only just with time, but with what it thinks is fine with maintenance and also potentially starving, right? Like, oh, I better hold on to this stuff. And you're stressed. So your cortisol now, right, loves to go around to the belly area. So you're compounding all these things on top of each other. So I told her the thing she needed to do, and this is what I do for my clients, they calculate, how much calories do you need to be eating? And I break it down protein, fats, carbs, right? And we talk about what those really look like for that person. And I actually asked her to eat an extra 400 calories a day minimum. And she was flabbergasted. She's like, I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to eat more food. Um, and I tried to explain to her all of the reasons why. And when she actually started eating more, and giving her body what it needed, she actually started losing weight. And it took a couple of months to see that, but then she saw it and she was also feeling better. She had more energy. Our hormones aren't made from thin air. So our hormones are made a lot from fat and cholesterol. And so we got to get it in our diet. And so that helped with a lot of the symptoms, slowly adding foods back in, getting rid of that food fear for her. We did do a stool test, which I know you don't want to hear.
Good for
Uh,
her.
we found out she had some extra candida in her body, which we can see in the stool test. So, we didn't do a candida-free diet, but we lowered the sugar and the fungus in her diet, and added in some supplements. And really, it was kind of like night and day over about I would say like a 3 or 4 month period. I still see her every now and then, but yeah, she's doing much better. She lost about 20 pounds in that first year. And the nice thing is I like to tell people, I don't want you to need me forever. Like you shouldn't need me forever. You should need me for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 18 months at the maximum, depending with what's going on and how complicated medical issues are, medications, things like that. But really, like, I'm happy to see you once or twice a year after that. I look at my clients' blood work from a nutritional standpoint, and like, they can kind of treat me like a functional practitioner of theirs, in a team of people maybe that they see. And so, yeah, I see her every now and then, and she's doing quite well. And she's now 49, I think, maybe 50.
Oh,
So, that's all to say, like,
poop in a box.
poop in a box. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
We also did do a Dutch test with her, which I didn't mention, to really make sure we knew what was going on with her hormones. But again, yeah, she was kind of she's the classic case, I think, of when I'm
Yeah.
talking to a lot of these women and a lot of the experiences that we all kind of see. And one of the things that I haven't talked to you about yet, but I do mention to most of this group of clients is when we go from our ovaries are producing most of our hormones, especially our sex hormones, when we're no longer using those, right? Um, our adrenals take over that job, our adrenal glands. Our adrenal glands are also responsible before that for producing DHEA, cortisol, which many of us know as our stress hormone, right? And so a lot of the times we come into perimenopause and menopause with our adrenal glands pretty tired because we've all been pretty stressed. A lot of people in this age range, right, are mothers, grandmothers, that are doing everything for everybody, doing nothing for themselves. And so I often tell women if we can get our adrenal glands pretty healthy and not fatigued before we go into menopause and even perimenopause if possible, then the job of taking over from the ovaries, the estrogen and progesterone out of the adrenals is much easier as a transition. And that's where a lot of the symptoms come from, is our adrenal glands are so tired, they can't produce any estrogen or testosterone. And now we're asking them to do that as the majority gland in our body that is producing those things. So oftentimes it is managing stress, right? Before we get to that point. And also, blood sugar regulation is a massive part of our cortisol and how we manage that. So, I talk a lot about blood sugar regulation to most of my clients, and most people hear that and they're like, well, I don't have diabetes. I'm like, yeah, we all have to run off of glucose. Like, this is part of how our energy in our body works.
Well,
And
I'm advanced there because of my son has it, but yeah.
right. So, yeah,
So
I
I
mean, you
do
probably
understand quite a
know.
lot about blood sugars, but I never really thought about it for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and oftentimes people don't, right? Unless there is a condition. And so that's why I'm not a big fan of a lot of these things like intermittent fasting, and like food restriction from that standpoint, because really blood sugar regulation, in my opinion, starts when we wake up. And so longer we delay that decision to eat a meal, the more we're really dysregulating our blood sugar. Um, there is a way to fast for women that can be okay. I also think sometimes it can be just a really restrictive lifestyle, and we can get into that whole talk too if you want of like diet culture, right? And what does the world expect us to look like as women, right? Small, petite, and stay that way forever, right? Don't ever change. So there's also a whole social norms component to this that I love to talk to my clients about as well. And kind of managing expectations that it's okay to change, right? Our hormones change. How can we expect our bodies to remain like exactly the same as they were in high school? Like that's just not, it's not always possible or ideal, right? Even for our optimal health living. And so I think it's hard because we see that stuff modeled in the media, right? And so it's
Yeah.
hard to think that we would be different than those people, but we also don't know what they're going through as well, right? And so, yeah, it's a very large conversation that I do love to have, but I think it warrants looking at as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have time for that today, but no, I think it'd be a really interesting talk just because it is true. When
Yeah.
Cindy Crawford, she was my age and she's posting pictures of her in a bikini and she looks
Yep.
amazing. And you're like, how have you had two kids?
And
But you're
I
right.
feel like on the opposite spectrum of that too, right? Not to like call anybody out, but Tyra Banks, right? People were giving her a lot of guff about getting back on the runway at, I don't know how old she is now as well, probably well into her 50s, I would guess, maybe late 40s, I don't know. But she's gained a little bit of weight since her modeling days. Now she's also a very tall person, but it's interesting the treatment she got. And I say interesting, but it's really probably quite sad,
Yeah.
and a little depressing. But yeah, I think it goes, yeah, like you're saying, like it's kind of like a lose-lose situation.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to come back always and talk to you anytime.
Oh, thank you. Well, tell our listeners how they can find you, or what's the best way to contact you.
Sure. So mostly I work one-on-one with private clients. I do some corporate nutrition work as well. So like cooking classes and fun stuff like that. So for businesses. Um, but pretty much the best way to find me, I'm somewhat active on Instagram. I do check it daily. So that's a decent way to reach out to me. On my website, there's a contact page that goes directly to my email. So
Okay.
that's also a great place to reach me. But yeah, all my services are virtual. I have clients all over the world. I have clients in New Zealand and Europe and South America and all over. So really,
Wow.
post COVID, no longer have an office and I'm licensed in a lot of places. So I do a lot of work, all my work virtually, except for corporate clients. I do those in person now.
Oh, that's nice because I was gonna
It
say,
is.
well, what if they're not in Colorado? But no, that's not an issue.
No, no, definitely not an issue.
And then I always ask these two questions of guests, and that is, how do you maintain your own balance, your own peace when, as you're talking about, we're so we're busy. We're all very busy. Um,
Good
what do you
question.
do?
Um, I think for me, I mean, I love what I do. So, and I do what I do also because I love food. So for me, it's also a balance between eating healthy, like it's kind of like that 70 to 80% of the time I eat very healthy, a very nutritious, and I really actually enjoy eating that way as well. I grew up with a health nut mom, and so eating the steamed vegetables and the brown rice and the chicken, like I actually really enjoy that. I don't eat that all the time. Um, but then there's that 20 or 30% of the time where I really am eating just for enjoyment, right? Going out and experiencing food, sushi, making my grandmother was a Mexican cook at a restaurant. And so, doing the fried tacos with the refried beans. So I have maintained and learned how to maintain a nice balance with my food that I really enjoy. Has taken me some time to get there.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, because I do think that keeps me balanced, taking time for self-care. Now, I acknowledge my husband and I don't have any kids. So there is a little bit of a luxury to that
You
sometimes.
have two dogs.
We have one dog.
Oh
Had
no. I'm sorry.
two dogs.
Yes,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
Moving along.
we just have the
I'm
one now.
sorry.
No, it's okay. It was earlier this year, so it's been a little while, but yeah, it was a transition. But yeah, no, I mean we do have the dogs, but lots of self-care. And I think part of loving what you do, and I think you can appreciate this, is finding the cutoff point, especially when you do work virtually from home, right? Like, is it 5 o'clock? Is it 6 o'clock? Is it 9 o'clock? Right? Like, when are you
Right.
stopping the work? And so for me, kind of scheduling in, for me, self-care is a lot of walks outside, listening to podcasts, sometimes just for fun, right? Reading books. Last year I got a sauna blanket as a gift. So
Oh,
sometimes I'm getting
do
in
you
my
love
sauna
it?
blanket. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Betty, I use it like 3 or 4 times a week.
Oh,
It's such a great excuse to just quite
lay.
literally do nothing. Yeah.
Herkle
So
Durkle.
yeah, so that's been really, I mean, I acknowledge that's a price tag and it was a gift, but I use it quite often. I definitely got my money's worth out of it. But like little things like that, I just try to schedule in something every day. Today I didn't work out, so today's a nice walk day. And yeah, that might be it for today. But yeah, just scheduling in that self-care for me, I think is really big.
And then I work a lot with women who are looking towards retirement, and a lot of studies show that if you go into retirement with, passions, hobbies, interests outside of work, um, that you're a much happier retired person. Do you have any hobbies or interests outside of work that you would like to share, or that maybe someday would be part of? I mean, I think that what you're doing with the self-care is
Yeah,
something huge, right?
for sure. Yeah. Well, I do knit. I haven't been knitting quite regularly as I used to, but I do like to knit. And that is something that is very soothing and very meditative. Um, I like to read. I'm a huge book nerd. I remember just spending lots of time in the library, in schools, in between activities. And so reading fiction for me, right, or autobiographies, things like that, that I'm not, because I'll read a lot of books for work too, and I do enjoy that, but sometimes I just like need to not do that. I especially try not to do that before I go to bed.
Yeah,
Well, some weird,
totally.
weird dreams about work. Um,
Yeah.
And then I think the big one for me is travel. Like I think
Yeah.
that was one of the big reasons why, my husband and I decided not to have kids was because we do love to travel quite a lot. And so we haven't been doing it a whole lot in the last 5 years, but we do really hope to get back to it soon, on a more regular basis. I mean, we take trips here and there, but mostly in the country. So in a couple weeks we'll be in New York. I have to go for work, but we're gonna make a nice trip out of it, go see a show, have some good meals. But yeah, really like getting back to that international travel and like I have a whole long list of things. So yeah,
Yeah, you guys have been everywhere.
we've been to a
Which
lot
is
of
great.
places.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean like amazing, inspiring places to go to.
I want to keep adding to that list for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I think, well, I've learned a lot. So I hope
Oh,
that that listeners have learned a lot. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
thanks, Betty.